The emergency room doors burst open, but I wasn't the one on the stretcher. My brother-in-law, Marcus, stood over me in my own living room, his knuckles white, screaming that he'd put me in an ICU bed right in front of my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He thought I was just a quiet, soft-spoken widow living off my late husband's pension. He thought my silence was weakness. But Marcus didn't know who I actually was before I took off the uniform. He had no idea about the classified ops, the hand-to-hand combat training, or the instinct that turns a mother into a tactical predator the moment her child is threatened. When he raised his hand, he thought he was asserting control. He didn't realize he was opening a door he'd never be able to close. Stay tuned, because what happened next shocked everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and if you saw me in the grocery store holding my 6-year-old daughter Lily's hand, you'd probably think I was just another quiet widow trying to make ends meet. After my husband, David, passed away, I did everything I could to build a calm, peaceful life for Lily in our suburban home. But to David's older brother, Marcus, my soft-spoken nature looked like easy prey. It started on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The doorbell rang, and before I could even ask who it was, Marcus pushed his way inside. He was a large, arrogant man who used his size to intimidate everyone around him. "We need to talk, Sarah," he barked, stepping into my hallway without taking off his mud-caked boots. David owed me money. A lot of it. And since this house was technically in the family name before you two got married, I'm taking ownership. You and Lily have 30 days to pack up. I kept my voice dead level. David didn't owe you anything, Marcus. The deed is solely in my name, paid for in full. You need to leave. That was the wrong answer, for a bully used to getting his way. Marcus's face flushed a deep, furious red. He stepped directly into my personal space, towering over me. "Listen to me, you little leech," he snarled, throwing his hand up and balling it into a tight fist. "I will beat you within an inch of your life and leave you in an ICU bed right in front of your daughter if you don't sign this place over." Behind me, I heard Lily let out a tiny, frightened sob from the kitchen doorway. In a fraction of a second, my pulse slowed. The living room vanished, replaced by the instinct, muscle memory, and ice-cold tactical clarity of my past. Marcus saw a defenseless woman frozen in fear. He had no idea he was standing in front of a former Special Operations operative trained to neutralize threats before they even knew what hit them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I simply looked him dead in the eye and prepared my response. Marcus expected me to scream, to cry, or to beg. Instead, I just stared into his eyes, calculating his balance, his center of gravity, and the precise 3-move sequence that would put him on the floor with a broken wrist. But as my fingers subtly shifted into a defensive stance, my gaze drifted to Lily trembling near the door. Physical violence in front of my daughter was off the table. Before I became a mother, I spent 6 years serving in a classified special operations unit. I'd been deployed overseas, trained in close-quarters combat, advanced reconnaissance, and psychological warfare. I knew how to destroy a threat physically, but my military career had taught me something even more important. Real tactical dominance isn't about throwing the first punch. It's about setting a trap so complete that the enemy destroys themselves. Marcus thought he was the predator here, but he was playing a game he didn't understand. "Get out of my house, Marcus," I said, my voice eerily calm, carrying the quiet authority of a commanding officer. "We'll continue this conversation later." He laughed, taking my quiet response for cowardice, and strutted out the door, believing he'd won. The moment his truck pulled out of the driveway, the soft-spoken widow vanished. I sat down at my laptop and activated the skills that once made me a ghost in high-threat zones. Within 2 hours of digging through public records and encrypted databases, I found what Marcus was running from. He wasn't trying to collect a debt. He was drowning in millions of dollars of hidden liabilities, tax fraud, and shady offshore business deals. Marcus wanted a war. I was about to give him one. 2 days later, the entire family gathered at Marcus's oversized estate for a Sunday dinner. To everyone else, Marcus was the successful businessman, the pillar of the family. He welcomed everyone with loud laughs and expensive wine, but the moment I walked in holding Lily's hand, his smile turned razor-sharp. He didn't waste any time. Right between the main course and dessert, Marcus clinked his glass to command the room. "I want to make an announcement," he said, looking around the table at my late husband's relatives. "As you know, Sarah has been struggling to manage David's affairs since his passing. Out of family duty, I've offered to step in and handle her estate so she isn't overwhelmed." He looked directly at me, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "I'm sure Sarah will agree that letting me take over the property is the best move for everyone. Right, Sarah? Unless you want things to get uncomfortable for you." It was a subtle, cruel callback to the threat he'd made in my living room. My husband's family looked at me, expecting me to nod meekly, as I usually did. Instead, I set my fork down with a deliberate, quiet click. I took a sip of water, met his gaze, and smiled softly. "That's very generous, Marcus," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet room. "Just like your generous investments in those offshore shell companies in Grand Cayman? The ones currently being flagged for tax evasion." Marcus froze. The color drained from his face, as if he'd been struck by lightning. "I'm sure the family would love to hear how you're managing those funds," I added smoothly, "before we discuss my house." The dinner had shattered Marcus's illusion of control, and I knew a wounded, desperate bully would react the only way he knew how, with blind aggression. That night, after making sure Lily was asleep in her room, I secured the house. I guided her into our concealed panic space, reinforced interior room equipped with independent communications and surveillance monitors, and locked it tight. With Lily safe, I turned off every light in the house, letting the pitch-black shadows swallow the living room. Then I waited. At 2:15 a.m., the quiet click of a crowbar echoed from the back patio. A moment later, the glass shattered and the rear door creaked open. Marcus stepped through the doorway, his heavy footsteps echoing across the hardwood floor. In his right hand, he held a steel tire iron. He was breathing heavily, fueled by alcohol and rage, completely unaware that he was walking straight into a kill zone designed by a former special ops operative. "Sarah," he growled into the darkness, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you're smart? You ruined me in front of everyone. By the time I'm done with you tonight, you won't be talking to anyone ever again." He took 3 steps deeper into the hallway. I didn't utter a word. Moving with absolute silence, I closed the distance behind him, stepping out from the shadows like a ghost. Before he could even register the shift in air pressure, I struck. In one fluid, precise sequence, I swept his front leg, drove an elbow directly into his radial nerve to force him to drop the tire iron, and slammed his heavy frame face first onto the floor. Before his head hit the ground, I had his arm pinned behind his back in a hyperextended joint lock, pinning him helplessly against the floorboards. Marcus gasped for air, his face crushed against the wood, completely paralyzed. Marcus tried to thrash beneath me, but the harder he fought, the tighter my leverage became. A sharp, agonized groan escaped his throat as I applied just enough pressure to his shoulder joint to let him know it would tear out of its socket if he made another move. "Listen to me very carefully," I whispered directly into his ear, my voice cold, precise, and devoid of any emotion. "You thought you were breaking into the home of a defenseless widow. You thought you could intimidate me. But you have no idea who I am or what I served as before I had Lily." He gasped for air, his nose pressed flat against the hardwood. "Sarah, please, you're breaking my arm. Shut up," I commanded, pressing my knee firmly into the small of his back. 8 months ago, you started embezzling from your own firm to cover your gambling debts. 3 months ago, you forged David's signature on a fake loan document. And 4 days ago, you threatened to put me in the ICU in front of my daughter. I pulled his arm half an inch higher, making him let out a muffled scream. "I have every bank statement, every forged document, every wire transfer, and every recorded threat saved on a secure server. I didn't just track your debts, Marcus. I handed a complete, ironclad portfolio of your financial crimes to federal investigators 2 days ago." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The arrogant bully vanished, replaced by a terrified man who suddenly understood that he was completely helpless, outmatched, and facing the total destruction of his life. "Now," I said smoothly, "here is what happens next. Before Marcus could utter another word, red and blue strobe lights flashed through the living room blinds, slicing through the darkness. The muffled wail of police sirens died down in the driveway, followed by the heavy, authoritative thud of boots echoing on my front porch. I dialed emergency services and alerted my federal contacts the second my perimeter sensors detected Marcus on the back patio. "Federal agents, open up," a voice shouted from the porch. I released my grip on Marcus's arm, stepped back into the shadows, and flipped on the main overhead lights. The abrupt brightness blinded Marcus, who scrambled to his knees, clutching his shoulder, disoriented and sobbing. I unlocked the front door, stepping aside as 4 armed federal agents and 2 local police officers swept into the foyer with firearms drawn. "He's all yours," I said calmly, stepping out of their line of fire. The lead agent, whom I'd briefed earlier that morning, recognized me instantly and gave a brief, respectful nod. Within seconds, 2 officers forced Marcus face down onto the floor, pulling his arms behind his back and snapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. "Marcus Vance," the lead agent declared, reading him his rights over his desperate babbling. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, federal wire fraud, breaking and entering, and felony assault." As they hauled him out the front door, the entire neighborhood stood watching from their lawns. Marcus, once the proud, towering pillar of the family, was paraded in handcuffs, weeping like a child as he was shoved into the back of a police cruiser. The family's golden boy was officially finished. By morning, news of Marcus's arrest swept through the rest of the family. The documents I handed over to the authorities exposed every lie he'd ever told, leaving no room for anyone to defend him. With the help of my legal team, I obtained permanent restraining orders to ensure he, or anyone connected to his criminal mess, would never set foot near us again. The house, our future, and our peace were completely secured. Standing in the kitchen the next morning, I made breakfast as the sun flooded through the window. Lily walked in, rubbing her eyes, completely unaware of the storm that had raged while she slept safely in our panic space. She wrapped her tiny arms around my waist and looked up at me with a bright, innocent smile. I knelt down and pulled her close. My time in special operations taught me how to fight, but being a mother taught me what is truly worth protecting. Real strength isn't about yelling, making empty threats, or posturing like a bully. True power is quiet, patient, and unwavering when it comes to defending the people you love. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.